remove the stem and leaves from the tomatoes you'll be using in this recipe. Serrano peppers, a bell pepper, tomatoes. Bring a pot of water to a boil and then add your vegetables. Be careful not to splash any hot boiling water on you. What we're doing here is washing the tomatoes, and whenever they start to form a crack and peel, that's whenever the vegetables are ready to be removed from the water. Now I'm cutting this bell pepper into quarters, but it's not going to be used for the salsa. Instead, I'm using it for the filling of the pupusas. And here I'm removing the seed / core from the bell peppers. Now with the serrano peppers, I am removing the stem on the top part of the peppers. And I'm leaving one whole, but I'll be slicing another in half because I don't need to use both of these. Trying to see what level of heat these are going to bring and not wanting to burn my mouth on the first try. Just wanting to show what's inside of the serrano here. And this is what I was talking about. You see how it's already peeling itself? That's what happened in the boiling water. And we will be removing that outermost layer of skin very carefully. I'm doing this while it's right out of the water. So that's why I'm being very fragile with my fingertips. Now I'm removing the last of the skin on the last tomato. We are cutting these into halves. In here, you see that I'm cutting an onion into a half. I'm only using half an onion in this whole recipe and taking off the end because we don't need it. Now, after cutting this into a half, I'll be cutting it into a quarter. Then I'll be cutting one of the quarters into an eighth. Into a blender, I put in 2 of the tomatoes or 4 halves that I've cut, an eighth of an onion, and only 1 of the serrano peppers. Add half a tablespoon of garlic powder and half a teaspoon of cumin. Adding salt to taste, I used half a teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of vegetable oil. And here I'm blending the salsa pretty fine before putting it onto a skillet. And I'm turning the eye on medium-high heat. The goal here really is to reduce the moisture a little bit in the salsa and just to further cook everything, make it homogeneous and smell amazing. Here you see it's already bubbling after a few minutes, so we're good to go. Boil 2 pounds of chicken. Shred 10 ounces of mozzarella cheese because it's hard to have too much cheese. And I'm shredding about 11 ounces of this queso melt. Adding our cheeses into a separate bowl, and I went ahead and I put them together, mix it around a little bit. Now to shred the chicken after it's been completely cooked. And as you see, I've already started on one. This is the second piece, and I'll be doing the third and fourth I just use 2 forks to do this, mainly because I'm used to this method. So there we go. Using the blender that I've made some salsa in, I'll be further shredding the chicken. This is just so that it's easier to put into the pupusas, and also there will be more salsa anyways in the filling. Into a bowl, I am putting the mozzarella and queso melt shredded cheese, as well as the shredded chicken that I just pat in the blender. And my goal here is really to mix everything together, make sure everything is as even as possible. Now you really have to get in there with your hands. This is the most efficient way to make sure that you're mixing it as best as you can. You can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. And for the filling salsa, I am putting in 1 tomato, a quarter of an onion, a quarter of a bell pepper, a quarter teaspoon of cumin, and 1 tablespoon of this tomato chicken bouillon, as well as 1 garlic clove. And blending this salsa filling mixture together. Now we add the salsa filling mixture to our chicken and cheese mixture. And again, have to get in there with your hands. You can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. This is where the real love all comes together. And really and truly, this alone does taste amazing. Here I used 6.5 cups of masa and 4 cups of warm water, and I used salt to taste. Now here, I could have just stopped at 6 cups. Honestly, I lost count, and all it really takes is a little bit more water. As you see, whenever I get to working with bringing the masa and water together, that I needed more water than what I initially put in. I added about half a teaspoon of salt. I know it's really hard to tell. And here I am working, hydrating the masa, really trying to make sure everywhere gets the moisture that it deserves. As you see, I have water next to me on standby, just adding it as I go, just getting a feel for it until it gets to a point where I feel that I am okay. And here I am testing out a ball of the masa, patting it back and forth, getting a feel for it, and to me, it was a little dry, so I went ahead and added more water. And the consistency that I'm going for here is something that isn't going to produce any dry corn flour masa flakes. Essentially, I want everything to be together, homogeneous and smooth, and I believe I achieved that. And the reason why you want to make sure that there's moisture is because if you try to fold the pupusa in on itself, it'll start to form cracks, and we don't want cracks. So I believe I am somewhat close. Now this was the first one, and almost like pancakes, I found out that my first one was not going to be the most beautiful. I went over the top and decided to use an ice cream scoop to put the filling inside of the pupusa, and here I am folding the pupusa in on itself. And this is where the cracks would really start to pop up if it was too dry. But this one is still a little dry, and I wasn't adding any oil or water to the outside, but this is how it turned out. And you can see the little cracks that are there, but it's not anything too major. If anything, you'll see the flavor when it's done cooking. Water is our friend, everybody. So I went ahead, put my fingertips in a cup of water, and I went on both sides just to make sure that I'm still hydrating it. Now, it did get a wee bit more tacky, but that's fine. And I went ahead and, as you can see, trying to show a little bit better here, that I'm just patting the ball back and forth, making it into a circular disc, trying to flatten it but not get it too flat. I want a little bit of thickness because I don't want anything to pop out if it can be kept from popping out. And also, towards the end, after putting the filling in, and you fold up the pupusa almost as if it was a dumpling a little bit. What I did was use more water. I didn't want to use oil too much, so that's why I'm just using water, and it happened to work out for me. But if you want to use oil or whatever you're doing to hydrate the masa part of the pupusa, whenever everything's together, it'll really help to move over some of the masa where you do see a hole or a crack, as long as it's not major. Anything for the perfect pupusa. On those crimped ends, you can just remove those and put those back in the bowl, or if you need it, you can put it over the opening that is formed at this part of the pupusa, and you just want to fold everything over, try to close that hole. And I'm using water here again just to make sure everything is nice and beautiful, and I'm patting it back and forth in my hand until it gets a little flatter. As you see, a little water helped to cover up that hole, but I didn't have any on the other side because it is hydrated. It is thick enough to withstand what I'm doing here. With a skillet on medium-high heat and some oil, not too much oil, just place the pupusas on the skillet, and I am cooking both sides 6 minutes aside, and you'll see the color that it brings and where the holes are. A little bit of cheese came out, and this recipe made 15 pupusas. All right, everybody, it's taste test time. Let's see what I pulled off. Oh, this it. I need salsa real quick. Nice little subtle heat. I want to show everybody what's inside, but the cheese is so melty, you can barely see any of the meat. You feel the meat. You're trying to pull out this way. I had to dodge off screen real quick, but this is really good. If I had to rate it for myself, I give it a 4 out of 5. I don't know what I want to do with it. Maybe a little bit more flavor, some kind of how, but for someone that just wants a chicken alternative, this is it right here. I'm your boy Kilo Kaneki, and I'm out. Have a blessed one. Peace.